We are into the final nugget on Cisco CME, and you can think of this one as the miscellaneous nugget. Meaning, up till now, we've seen the base configuration, Ephone, Ephone DNs, we saw the shared lines, button overlay. I would say those are the core to get your IP telephony network up and running, and then we're going to add a little miscellaneous fluff to that. Now, I know some of you might look and go, wow, well, SIP phones, isn't that a big deal? No. I'll tell you why. Well, at least not right now. I'll tell you why when we get into the actual content. But we're just going to add in some of the other miscellaneous items that you can see here on the list. But I do want to take this moment to let you know that there is a lot more to CME. I wrote the CCNA voice book back, what was that? Back in 2007, 8, sometime around then, when CCNA Voice was all Cisco Call Manager Express, and literally there was enough to fill a book, and I had to cut off what I was writing in that book to just focus on the exam content because there is so much that you can do with CME. However, this is the core. Think of this as like you got it up and running, and now you are empowered to go beyond if you'd like to, because once the base foundation is laid, it's just adding whatever features you'd like. Well, let's start off with the world of SIP. Now, I'd like to give you an honest, real-world sort of overview of SIP versus Skinny, the Skinny protocol, and then we'll get into kind of the technical details. Because if you read the books, you'll see, well, Cisco does support SIP phones, and you can use the SIP firmware on all of them, and all of that. And it's true. It absolutely is true. However, let me just give you my experience. I've been in the Cisco Voice over IP world since 2002, which is a long time. And Cisco had long since, I remember back then, they were looking at SIP and they were going, no, we will not support that. That is, it's too new, it's not mature enough, it's not developed enough, and they stood that way for years and years and years. Meanwhile, all the other vendors started kind of picking up their bandwagon, and I'll just leave them as the heathen vendors, non-Cisco voice over IP vendors, started picking up their bandwagon, and they're all like, oh, SIP, 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 SIP. We support SIP, we love SIP, but they knew that SIP was not done either. So what did they do to get the features that they wanted with SIP? They added extensions. Extensions, anytime you hear SIP extensions, don't think of directory numbers or phone numbers that you call. SIP extensions are proprietary add-ons to try and get the features that you want. You see, back in 2002 when I got into it, SIP was like, hey, you can get dial tone. Yay! Congratulations, you got dial tone. There was virtually no features that were common to all the different phones. And I say that tongue-in-cheek. There were some basic ones, but not for a real phone system. So all these vendors would add their own proprietary flavors. And Cisco's like, well, why are we going to do that when we've got Skinny, which is a proprietary protocol in itself that works great and does all the features? I don't want to just create a bunch of proprietary extensions that only work for us anyway. So time goes on. Cisco starts getting beat up by all these other vendors saying, you are proprietary, you are, blah, 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 because you don't support SIP. And Cisco's like, but guys, it's not done yet. You've got your, like nobody's listening. So finally Cisco's like, all right, let's roll this out. So we start seeing SIP support appear in Call Manager. We start seeing it on the voice gateways in Call Manager Express. But in this sort of not done flavor, as in there's two kind of levels of SIP that you run into. I think of it like SIP level 1 and SIP level 2. So there's these certain phones, like the older phones that Cisco produced, that are SIP level 1, and they, if you use SIP to run them, they'll get the basic SIP support, meaning you can get dial tone. This is my yay phone, you work. Hold. Maybe a conference call, just basic level support. Now, SIP level 2 is where Cisco said, okay, well, let's start engineering these devices to actually have, a lot more features, some of which are proprietary in nature. We've got our own extensions for them, some of which are industry standard as the SIP protocol has begun to evolve. And you can think of this as the more newer phones that are out there. Okay, so that's kind of the evolution of where this is all came from. Now let me give you one man's experience. Skinny just works. right? So you get the phone, you pull it out of the box, you plug it in, you do the telephony service configuration that I showed you in the previous nuggets, and it's like, hey, it works. You know, it works with just about any version of Skinny firmware that you're using. It all just kind of, it's like this happy, fuzzy, hug your friend kind of world. SIP. Okay, so let me give you my SIP experience. I started experimenting with SIP on the Cisco IP phones when I got this brilliant idea to build my own phone system. You know, there's licensing involved in the Cisco phone system, and there's a product called Asterisk. Some of you have probably heard of it out there. It's a Linux-based distribution of software that is essentially build your own phone server for free. And I'm like, hey, I'm all about garage sales and free stuff, so I go at it. And I'm thinking, okay, well, Asterisk is going to be all SIP based. I can sum up to you, my eyes are bleeding after a month of time. And I'm talking a month of time of like real time where I'm sitting there in the evenings. I'm up till 2 in the morning. I'm like, I know I can get this to work. I got my Cisco 7970 to register with the Asterisk server. And I went, yay! And I got dial tone, and I go, this has been the most painful experience of my life. So then I take that back to the Call Manager Express world and CUCM. And I'm going through the same kind of thing. I'm like, oh, wait, I need version 8.3 release 9.3 to work with this? But wait a sec, I thought 0.92 and what? Oh, wait a sec. So I can't upgrade from 0.93 to 4.0. I have to go from 0.93 to 0.95, then do a backdrop to point. I mean, this sounds crazy, but I'm dead serious. It's whacked in this SIP world. So now I'm giving you one man's experience. If you go to the technical documentation, you will find it's like, well, Cisco does support SIP. Here is the input. Here is the firmware images. And if you would like to, but Google a little beyond that. Google to SIP pain. Maybe put some keywords in there like that, and you'll find out I'm not the only man having these experiences. The consensus, and I'll say industry-wide, let me save you a month of your life. Use SIP for inter-vendor operations, and especially a feature known as SIP trunks. Meaning, you've got your CME gateway device that connects up here to a WAN or an ISP connection, and somewhere out there is an ITSP, an Internet Telephony Service Provider, which is essentially someone that you can link up to and send your calls, and they will actually be your bridge to the public switch telephone network. SIP works great for that. Now on the inside, this is where you got your connection to your PoE switch and all your Cisco IP phones. Oh, please use Skinny there. It'll just make your life so much easier. You will get the feel. This sounds like I'm standing on a soapbox, but really I'm not. I'm like, I want to save your life. That's why that's where my paycheck comes from. Is people pay me? They're like, here, Jeremy, go through pain. I want you to, so that I don't have to. So I'm really saving you pain right now. Now, will it always be this way? No. Will there be a day when Skinny is gone? I have a feeling the answer to that is yes. But keep in mind, there's always going to be these proprietary extensions to SIP. There's always going to be something. I mean, otherwise, what do you have? You have every vendor making the same phones that support the same features, and everybody's like, yeah, we all do the same stuff. That's not the way of capitalism. That's not the way. People are like, I've got one. Look, my phone makes coffee. SIP extension. The coffee making is not a standard-based feature of SIP, so somebody had to add a proprietary extension that when somebody dials 5592, the Folgers coffee starts to brew at your phone. I mean, those are the kind of features where people are like, oh, I'll buy that. I mean, so those kind of things are always going to need some kind of proprietary extension. If you're going to create proprietary extensions, why not have a proprietary protocol? But that is the future. That I can't predict. But for now, I will tell you, save yourself pain. Use Skinny for the phones. Use SIP for your trunks or your uplinks to other gateways. Now keep in mind, I'm saying this from the perspective of a married man with 4 children, 5 years old and under. So my time is very precious to me. But if you would have caught me 10, 15 years ago when I was like, dude, I am all about putting a month of time into this, I would have said, show me these commands. These are the commands that you can use to get SIP running on your device to support end device clients. So really, I'm doing a side-by-side comparison. I'll show you on the live UC520. There we go. First off, you've got SIP service voice over IP. Go into global config mode, or what did I say? SIP service? Voice service, voice over IP. Think of this as like your control panel for all major things of voice on the gateway. This is not by any means just an area to support end clients. This is like control central for the voice gateway for all of the protocols. This is where you can come in and tune H323 timers or SIP registration statistics and timers and all that kind of stuff. And I showed you this in the base configuration. We have to go in and do the allow connections SIP to SIP because they are denied by default. And we kind of went through that in the base configuration. So that's kind of your home base for voice services on the router as a whole. Now, if you look underneath that, you see this voice registration global area. That's where you think of that as, and I wrote it on there. Think of that as your telephony service mode for SIP. So when you go into global and type in telephony service, that's where you get all your control for your skinny base phones. But we can come out here and do a voice register global. And you're kind of in the global mode for the SIP features, and you can. This is again. We saw some of this in the base configuration where we could come under here and we do the mode CME. Like we're going to support this kind of mode. You can start doing the source address, just like we saw IP source address under the telephony service mode. We can come in here and do 10.100.01 source address to receive registrations. Max DN, same kind of thing. You get that same feeling, right? Just like we're configuring the telephony service mode. But then we come to max. It's not ephone, it's max pool. So how many pools do you want to support? Think of pools as your ephone configuration. You might be like, well, why'd they call it pools? What's the deal with that? Well, you can configure this on a per ephone, like an IP phone basis, or if you put this router in SRST mode, survivable remote site telephony, so it supports phones. If call manager goes down, the big server, it can just do a pool-based configuration, or like one config that applies to all of them. So that's somewhat where that name comes from. So you exit out. So that's kind of your telephony service config. Then you start doing your ephone DNs in your ephones, but for SIP they call them voice register DN. You get the feel here? Voice register, voice register, voice register, because this is now considered a SIP registrar server. So I'm going to come in and do voice register DN, and this is DN, and this is where you put your little tag in there. Again, similar to the ephone DN tag, and I'll say 1, and I can do number, same exact configuration. Now, let's say 111.9, and I can even go in and start doing a label, like what label do I want on the phone? This is Bob's phone. You can go on. It's everything related to the directory number, and then we have the ephones themselves, or what SIP calls voice register. If I could spell it, voice register pools. So this is your ephone. This is where I would come in and say voice register pool 1 or ephone 1. Think of it like that. And then I could come in here and say, well, the idea of this is going to be a MAC address, and the MAC address of the device, just like we associate the. Oh, it looks like I have one already. Associate the. Let's go under here. There we go. The MAC address with the ephone, and then I would use the number command. So instead of the button command, I would say number 1. This will be, what the kind of like the line number on the phone will be actually associated with DN, or in our case, voice register DN number 1, and that would now associate that phone number. So again, same kind of configuration. It's just a different set of commands, and you really do get the feel when you're doing this, like, okay, this is really like two totally different worlds. We've got Skinny, its own global, its own phone configuration, and then we've got SIP and its own global and its own phone configuration. So you really wouldn't do both unless you really had to. Like, you wouldn't have one gateway that's kind of doing some SIP phones up here and some Skinny phones down here. You'll choose one or the other, and you know my opinion on that. Well, let's wrap up CME by looking at some of the miscellaneous commands for the ePhones. And then the big one will be the verification, which will help huge in troubleshooting. So first, the miscellaneous commands. Cisco came out with the ability to add different kinds of phones to the device. As a matter of fact, let me show you. I'm going to jump over here to my CME device. Let's just go under ePhone 1 and do type to where I can specify what kind of ePhone this is. And you can see I can specify, the whole gamut of phone models that Cisco has produced and supports. Now, we don't usually have to specify the type because if you're using Skinny, the CME router auto detects it and says, "Oh, you're a 7910 or whatever kind of model phone it is." But you can tell this is a static list. So let's say Cisco comes out with a new phone that isn't in this list. Well, rather than upgrade the iOS, maybe you don't have a support contract, maybe who knows what, fill in the blank. You just want to add that device to this, but you don't. It's not here in the list. What you can do is exit out and use the ePhone type command to specify new phones that are added to the system. So let's say Cisco here's my speech on Skinny versus SIP, and they're like, "Yay, we're so inspired by Jeremy and his support of our Skinny protocol. We are going to name our next phone after him." So I'll have the ePhone type Jer. So this will be essentially what shows up in the type list, and now I specify, well, what's all about this phone? You kind of specify the details of the phone. I'm going to say things like, well, the device ID will be 7776. Now, what is that? Well, this and let me back up. This will all be given to you on Cisco's website. They'll say, "Hey, these are all the Skinny device types," because when they register, they're going to say, "Hey, I'm device type 7776," and the call manager will say, "Oh, okay, so you're ePhone type such and such, which has you could do the number of buttons. This is this is the commemorative phone, so it actually has 100 lines on it. It's amazing. So it applies this you see what I'm doing here? So I'm going through and specifying all this, but you won't. This is not something you just would make up like I'm doing. Device name is Jeremy Chara, and you wouldn't normally do this. You would just go and specify this based on exactly what Cisco tells you to type from their website. So I'm just being goofy here. So let's exit out. And now if I go into the ePhone, let's go under ePhone 1 and do type. You can see all the models of phone and right there. Woo! I've got my own phone. So we now have the Jer formula, which it will auto-detect, or I can hard code the Jer phone in the list. So that's one of them. While we're here, you can see the SCCP preferred codec. I can also specify what codec I would like to use for the phone, like its preferred codec of use. Now, by default, you can see it's in default right here. All these phones will use G.711 ULAW. But I can tweak them and allow them to use things like ILBC, a nice compressed codec. And this is all firmware dependent. The firmware has to support it, or G729. So you can say, this is the preferred codec that this phone will use when it communicates. Now, if the phone doesn't support that, it's going to just fail back over to whatever the common ground is, which is usually G711 ULAW. This is kind of like the universal codec to rule them all. Now, this does coincide with when you go under telephony service, you can actually specify a codec for the system as a whole. Now you can see this CME router only supports 2 global codecs, so the ePhone one is more specific. It would overrule this if we have an individual phone making calls. So those are your 2 miscellaneous commands that I wanted to add to this kind of scope of understanding of CME. All right. Well, I wanted to flip on the video for the verification because there's some stuff you can do on the phone that just doesn't show up when you're doing the IP communicator. So I wanted to show you from an actual phone. I've got right here. Here's my 7970, which I just found out this morning. This is the most depressing thing to me. The handset stopped working. Well, it's not that the handset doesn't work. The little dip switch doesn't register that it's off hook. So now I gotta use this guy on speakerphone. That's a killer phone to just stop working like that. I probably probably dropped it, or my kids did. So I'm sitting on, this is on the 7970, and then I'll flip over here. Here's the 7960, and then this is the non-Cisco model, which is representing Avaya and things like that. So we've got, just kidding. I know some Avaya people are probably watching this series. So I'm sitting on here. If I want to get some key information from the device, because you'll find yourself on the device all the time, what you can do is just shoot down here to the settings button, and it pops up the menu to where we've got the user preferences, network configuration. Just about everything you want is under that network configuration. That's where we've got most of our stuff. We can see the DHCP server. Scroll down a few. You've got the MAC address of the phone itself, the host name, and as I scroll down, I start seeing things like the IP address, subnet mask, TFTP server. And you can see on the screen, well, I can't move around. Yeah, look at the screen. You can see that we've got VLAN, TFTP, IP address. You can verify all of that stuff from right here. Scroll, just keep scrolling down. There's our DNS settings. There's our operational VLAN ID. Sorry for the glare. It's showing VLAN 100. Is there on that list? Now on all of these Cisco's phones, there's a few key things. You probably, well, I'm seeing like a thumbnail the size of very small. But in the upper right corner here, you can see there's actually a lock. That means all of these settings are locked, and we can go to this phone and type in ** on the telephone keypad. Now you want to make sure that the buttons, or you're in a menu of some sort, not to where it's going to think you're trying to dial, and you'll see the lock has popped open. It's now accessible, and the menus at the bottom's changed, where now I can say, oh, I want to release my DHCP address, or I want to disable DHCP completely. Now you don't want to go about doing this on a phone by phone basis on a normal basis, but when you're troubleshooting, it's great to be able to try something from the phone and see if it works. So I can say, well, I don't want DHCP, and I want to scroll up here, and I want to set my IP address. You now, once you unlock it, you can edit the IP address, and it says, well, what IP address do you want? And you can go through and type all of those settings in. You can also, let's see what else I was going to, when you hit ** and it unlocks it, it also gives you the ability to erase your settings. Now, if you look back at the screen, I'm starting to get into the phone restart, reset, hard reset, all those kind of things. Now, you can do a phone restart. I showed you this in an earlier nugget, to where you can do a phone restart from the call manager by express router just by going under the phone and doing a restart for a warm boot or a reset for a cold boot. But from here, you can also do that ** quickly in succession, and that will do a manual reset of the phone from there. Now, there are times, and I want to show you this. It's pretty neat. I'm going to actually just pull the power of this phone, just disconnect the Ethernet cable there. But there are times where you'll want to do a hard reset of the phone. This happens sometimes if you have a password on the phone. A lot of times if you move over to the SIP image. A hard reset means it totally factory defaults itself. I mean, tries to re-download its firmware, everything. The way you do it, and you can see what I'm doing here, is holding down the pound symbol of the phone as I plug the phone in. Now, what will happen is the screen will turn blue, and you see it kind of going da, 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 da. It's doing like a little light dance. Da, 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 da. All the lines are going back and forth, and this works on almost every Cisco phone model I've come into. As soon as it starts doing that, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 *0 pound. You literally go in that sequence, in that order, within 60 seconds of the phones doing their little happy dance there. And you'll see right then the phone resets. It's now back to this upgrading. What it's doing is it's going to the TFTP server, which is actually my CME device. Ooh, I got to hurry on this. It's actually my CME router, and starts downloading all of the firmware applications for that. So, hey, let me do this. I'm going to bring my I got to go quick. Bring my UC520. I can't talk. Pressure. And type in this debug TFTP events. So we're actually able to watch. Did I miss it? I got it. Yes, I got some debug messages there. So in here, if I do a show flash, you can see that I've got all of these firmwares for the 7970. I actually flipped it from SIP to skinny and all that, and I've got the firmware images in there, and you can see it's serving them up. Why? Because in the non-recording hours, I did a let me do include TFTP server. I did all of these commands from global configuration mode to make those images available for this phone. So I'm able to use those debug commands, and that's really handy because a lot of times the phones will be sitting there doing something like this, and you're going, what are you doing? Are you requesting TFTP stuff? What's going on? And without that debug, you have no vision of what's really happening behind the scenes. So we'll keep that on as this phone is deciding to go through its boot process. If I can balance my camera there. Okay, so that was the phone restart, reset. We talked about those, and then a hard reset. That's what I was talking about with the hard reset. My phone is booting up here, so I just want to see if there we go. Look at that. That's what I wanted to show you. So once we got that TFTP debug on, we can actually see that this guy is looking for its configuration file. It's saying, "Hey, do you got this? I'm looking for it. I'm looking for an XML default, which is its button keypad. It's looking for what tones it can play. These are actually memory resident on the device. And now I look back here, and my phone is completely booted. It's got its extension number and all that. Now, also, one last thing I want to show you from the phone itself. I can go to the settings button and scroll down and get my model information. This is where I can see what model of device it is. I can see the MAC address as well, what firmware it's using. Man, let me jump back in there. And also, very handy is the status. Status messages allow you to see any kind of messages that are on there. Now, you can't. Well, I don't know if you can see them, but this says error updating locale because I don't have any language files loaded on the router. I'm English, and so English is the default. It's showing no CTL. That's a certificate trustless. That's if you really want to lock your phones down and say only register with this server and things like that. Sorry if this is rocking around. I'm just kind of holding the camera and doing this. And then finally we can do firmware version. Just go through this. Grab a phone and start running through it. When you jump over here, I don't know if this is, it's got to be hard to see with that fan glare in the background. But same style of configuration, just without the backlight. Got your network config, same options. Now, between the phone models, you're probably going to see some of them having different options available for you and whatnot. But that's the feel of it. Okay, so now let's look at some of these other ones. Okay, so let me kick the camera off there and buzz through the rest of these. We've seen the show ePhone, where you can do a show ePhone and verify what phones are registered. You can verify what numbers are assigned to each one of them. Really good information from there. If you want to see it on the SIP side, it's that show voice register all. And again, just replace everything ePhone with voice register since we're running a registrar server. You can do a debug ePhone register. Let's do that. Debug ePhone register. And actually watch the process. Let's go in. Let's do a global telephony restart. So I'm going to do a restart, and we'll do all. Now what it's going to do is it's going to actually start going through all of the phone models one by one. You can see that it's cycling through saying, do we have any of these? I'm sending restart messages to all of them, and they're all coming back and attempting to register. Now, I'm just thinking, if I do a warm reboot, I know I'm getting some. There we go. I was waiting to get the debug messages for the phones coming back and re-registering. So there's our ePhone 2, and this is how we're able to see the phone registration process. And now we're about to get swarmed because my 7970 just started rebooting as well. But you're able to see, the restart was sent. It went down. The skinny address is 10.100.0.11. I'm holding it just so it doesn't auto scroll back down. But you can go through and watch the whole process that it goes through as the phone itself is registering. And if you're ever getting stuck in the registration process, you'll be able to see where in the scheme of things you're getting stuck. So there's all the restart messages coming in for ePhone 1 as well. If you want to do the same thing on the SIP side, similar debug voice register events lets you see it. Well, that now gives you enough information to fully roll out and test a CME router to do a local telephony deployment of IP phones. So combine that with the dial plan information, which, it's funny, I keep having to say this, which right now is before CME but may come after. But put those two pieces together and you have a full IP telephony solution where you can send and receive incoming calls to and from the PSTN. You have local calling for phones on the network. I mean, we've come pretty far at this point in the series to put that all together. So At this point, I would just take a step back and just say, okay, let me review this all. Let me get all this in my head. Can I do this? Is this something? If I were walking into customer X and they said, "Hey, buddy, I've got a UC520 and a couple IP phones. Why don't you go at it? Take a couple hours and just roll that thing out to give us a phone support." Ask yourself the question: can I do it? Can I troubleshoot it? Can I put all those pieces in place? If not, take before you dive right into the next section, take some time and just think through, soak it all in, and run back and review a few of the key pieces, because I don't want to leave this foundation for we'll call it the more advanced stuff, if you will, without having all that foundation in place. All right. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for reviewing.